Welcome, everybody, to a Good Story podcast. Today, we're going to be covering famous sieges. We'll start with the Ottomans' march towards Vienna and how a force of 150,000 was halted by a mere 2,300. This story also involves the hiding of a dead sultan's body and a last-ditch charge by the defenders, who also laid booby traps. Next, we'll go on to the Ottomans in a different area of the world, and we learn never steal from sultans. It's a real bad idea. It will be the Venetians versus the Ottomans and Crete, how a capital stood for 21 years, fighting back and forth, and what it would be like to be born in a siege and just know that for your whole life. Lastly, we'll cover Europe being saved a second time, but no, this time it doesn't involve the Ottomans. How Russians would enter battle without a gun. How Hitler changed his siege from Moscow to Stalingrad, and that most likely saved Russia and doomed Germany in the east. And old, reliable Russian winter coming to save the day. All right, let's jump into it. Well, mine takes place between two large empire and a very tiny force that potentially saved Western civilization as we know it.
Yes.
Okay. I'm worried that Jared did the same one. So mine takes place between the Ottoman Empire.
No, we do the same ones.
Okay. Sultan Suleiman Magnificent. He was considered the greatest Ottoman ruler ever. He was the longest reigning. He had a lot of reforms, but he also conquered a lot of places, including Constantinople. And he is very old at this point. He is 72. He has gout. They have to carry him in a litter. But he decides for his last glory campaign, he realizes he's at the end of his life, and he decides to try to take Vienna. And so he gets a force of 100, the largest force he had ever gathered, 150,000 people, soldiers, not people. And he marches out with him. They're carrying him, and he can't walk or ride a horse. And so they carry him out, and they're going in. And at this point, to set this up a little bit for people who don't know, the Ottoman Empire had conquered pretty much all of the Balkans. They were on a roll. As I said, he was this ultimate conqueror guy. A lot of the rulers were conquerors. At this point, the Ottoman Empire was on a roll, and they had conquered Egypt and North Africa and many places. So they're going towards Vienna. And they run into the Habsburg Empire. It's got the Kingdom of Croatia and Hungary. And so they come up to this fortress. And I don't know how to pronounce the name, but I'm going to play it. And hopefully this is correct. It's the Siege of
Szigetvár.
What the fuck was that?
That is Google Translate helping me out, because I said there's no way I'm going to be able to read this. It looks nothing like what they say. I said, I'm not even going to try to butcher it. Screw it. I'm leaving. If the Google Translate pronounced it wrong, take your hatred out on them. They did it wrong, not me. And so, yeah, so they get there and there's the siege. And so they basically select this guy named Nikola IV Zainsky, probably butchered that, but he is this guy who is one of the biggest landowners in all of Croatia. He had fought in battles. He had really proven himself. So he gets elected as the leader, and he was the local leader of Croatia, the area. He wasn't a king or anything of that nature, but so they just say, hey, we all like you. You're a good military commander. How about you lead the resistance? And this is all in 1566. And so the Ottoman army marches up. the Sultan gets a huge, beautiful war tent on a hill so you can watch the battle, even though he doesn't participate at all because, as again, he's basically on death's door. And he's just watching the battle. And so they have 150,000 troops, like I said, and they have artillery and they have all the modern stuff. You know how many the other side had?
Maybe, I'm going to guess 1,000?
15,000?
A little bit more than that. A little bit more. 2,300. It was just local friends and allies. So you got 2,300 guys versus 150,000. So it's a little bit of a about 100
bit of a mismatch there.
147,000, a little bit of mismatch. So they all band together, and it's not really that great of a fortress, but it's divided into 3 parts. There's Old Town, New Town, and the castle. And actually, when the Ottomans show up, for some reason, they had thrown red cloth and banners over the castle and fired a cannon shot to welcome the Ottoman ruler to the area. So they end up attacking. You know, they do the assault because they say, "Hey, we have all these numbers." So they just assault them, and they're rebuked, and they assault again, they're rebuked, and they just keep losing people over and over and over. And eventually, the leader does the smart thing. He says, "Hey, if you surrender, because you're going to lose, I mean, but this is a pain in the ass. We're trying to get to Vienna. I will let you rule over all of Croatia, you know, Ottoman influence or control, but you will be the ruler of this area if you just surrender now." And the guy, Nikola, just doesn't respond to him, and they keep fighting. So then, yeah, he keeps fighting. So the most messed up part I found out about this was the Imperial Army from Vienna, led by Maximilian II. He was the Habsburg leader at the time, part of the Habsburg family. He had 80,000 troops just chilling right nearby, and they didn't help at all. They just we're here.
It's fuck you.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, you're kind of fighting, obviously for yourselves, but you know you're going to lose. You're fighting for us, but you know what? We're just going to
let you die.
Us and our 80,000 troops over here, we're not going to help you at all. So they just chill. They're close by and they just hang out. So I actually, if I was that guy, I would have probably just accepted the ruler just because I'd be like,
I would have been like, yeah, fuck it.
Yeah, are you kidding me right now? You're not even going to help me or help us, like help the people?
Yeah.
So then again, okay, so Suleiman, so here's the part that gets crazy. So Suleiman dies September 6th. Now, he dies from gout. And so the siege had started August 5th, and it goes to September 8th. So he's dead before this ends. But everyone's worried, his inner circle, that if they announce he's dead, that the troops will just abandon and just leave because their leader's dead. So they all keep it
worry.
Yeah, so they all keep it hush hush, and they're like, it's like a weekend at Bernie's thing, except they don't move the body because they don't let anyone see him. But they're like, the Sultan has made a decree today. Like the people would come out and be like, he has said in his encouraging words and such of that. And they send a guy to go tell his like successor, his son or whatever. You know, they gave him a note like, go, run, go to what state? Turkey, Asia Minor, go. And they end up strangling the physician because they think he's going to tell that the guy's dead. I'm like, what the hell? So they strangle him. This guy's dead, but they're still giving orders as if he's alive, pretending he's alive. And they pretend to do that for 48 days, by the way. They did that the entire trip back, too. They were just pretending he was alive. So Suleiman the Magnificent is gone, dead. So eventually they break through the wall. At this point, the wall is rubble because, like I said, they had artillery. So everything is just flat and collapsed. The castle's falling apart. It's destroyed. They're down to 600 men. And basically he makes this really, who knows if he actually said this, but he gives this powerful speech of, I will never leave you, my men and my knights. And so he leads a charge out from the castle with 600 soldiers. And they actually end up killing a bunch of the Turks, but he ends up getting shot twice and then hit in the head with an arrow. He dies. So then everyone's slaughtered because they did like this last charge, except for 7 guys apparently escaped. Somehow they escaped, and they escaped through the lines. And some Janissaries spared some of their lives because they said, hey, these guys were just their honor and their like the fact that they fought this well for this long. We're gonna spare your lives. I don't know what happened to them after that. Maybe they became slaves or something, but But
he survived. Here's a little bit of slavery.
yeah. So everyone's wiped out at this point. The siege has fallen. So why is this so important? I mean, yes, this little force has held out for a month against this massive force. Well, another thing. They set a booby trap for the Ottomans. They lit a slow fuse to the gunpowder in the castle. So when they went into the castle, it actually blew up, and they killed 3,000 more Turks. So
damn.
Yeah. A booby trap.
Got them some Turks.
They beheaded the guy. They sent it. No one really knows what happened. They say it's got sent to some guy, maybe the next ruler or whatever. Eventually, it did make its way back to his son, who buried it. The church got a proper burial. His body got a burial actually right away because from a Turk, no less, who was a prisoner, and Nikola had treated him well. So he said, the least I can do is bury this man's body honorably, so it's not, messed with or whatever. So, yeah. So basically, that's it. So why is this important? Well, winter starts coming. As I said, it's September 8th. The Ottomans lose between 20 to 35,000 troops. They're exhausted, and their ruler, even though they don't know it at the time, their ruler's dead. So they have to go, coordinate the next guy, blah, 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 and then announce the death, obviously, too, as well, and blah, blah, blah. So they decide to turn around, and this huge, ginormous military force, even though they took out 20 to 35,000 troops, I mean, obviously, there's still over 100,000. So, that still could have conquered Vienna, conquered a lot more territory into Europe, and they would have probably held, because the Ottoman Empire didn't fall till after World War I, so they would have held it for centuries more. So that's why it was known as the battle or the siege that saved Western civilization. So, yeah, that is the siege of, wait for it.
Seige's mad. Whatever that said, I couldn't really hear it.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm gonna go next because I'm related to yours. You said Ottoman Empire, and I was like, "Oh, you shit! You did."
Wait, you did the Ottoman Empire too?
I did.
Wow! You went for the obvious one, right?
Yeah, the obvious one, the Siege of Candia.
Oh no!
You know the Siege of Candia? It's the second longest siege in the history.
Oh, I thought you were gonna do.
Mine's pretty long.
Constantinople.
No. I mean, obviously, this part of the world has got a lot of sieges, but no, the Siege of Candia. This happened between. All right, so.
Well, tell us, Joe. Tell us what happens.
Oh yes, I will get into the story. So basically, it is 1644. The Knights Hospitaller decide, what would be a good idea? We're going to raid that ship that belongs to the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, and we're going to, take his treasure, and we're going to steal it and go back to Crete with it. Fun fact: this war is actually against the Ottomans and the Venetians again. At this time, the Venetians kind of control a lot of Crete and that area of Greece. Anyway, so the Ottomans kind of take this as an excuse to be like, all right, well, fuck it, you're gonna steal our gold. We're gonna invade all of Crete. So they do, and they send like 60,000-70,000 troops down to the island, and they basically within a couple of weeks they have conquered all of the island except for the capital. They haven't conquered Candia. So they go in, they siege Candia. They instigate when the Ottomans arrive. They have a very extensive series of trenches. They dig in, get ready for this siege, and for the next 21 years, they are sieging Candia. And so it's mostly a naval battle, actually, because I guess for the most part they're constantly sieging the actual city of Candia, but a lot of naval battles are fought between Venice and the Ottomans. because the Venetians are constantly blockading the Ottomans' supply lines, and the Ottomans are constantly blockading the Venetian supply lines, and it just keeps kind of going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Meanwhile, constantly during this time period, Candia is like basically fighting off a constant like wave after wave after wave of Ottoman Empire troops. They're constantly bombarding the city. During these 21 years, there are people who were born and live their entire lives under like a siege. Like people live their entire lives under siege, and they can remember that. Anyway, there's not a whole lot of details about the actual siege itself. I mean, this one's actual battles. I couldn't find a whole lot about that other than the naval battles. But towards the end of the siege, I do know that I have the Candia is sending out pleas for help for other major European powers. And the French do decide to come help, but they mess up in the most French way possible. It's fucking amazing. So they arrive, they do have like initial skirmish with the Ottomans, and they do initially well. And they're kind of doing all right. And then their ship, they're like the vice ship, whatever, like the second in command ship, basically of the fleet, has an accident and it explodes and catches fire, and they lose that ship. And then the French are like, "Well, that sucks. We're gonna go home now."
Oh my God.
Yeah. And so basically they just leave. And Candia's like, shit. And Vienna's got nothing left. They can't get it to them. And so Candia's like, well, we got 3,600 men left. We're facing about 70,000. The commander kind of sees the writing on the wall. Without even asking permission from Vienna, he surrenders and ends a 21-year-long siege. The Ottomans are actually pretty gracious, all things considered. They let all the civilians leave. All the Christians are allowed to evacuate the city. They even let the Venetians keep a couple key island ports in the area so they can have some like trade ports as they go between them. But other than that, they take Candia and they kind of get their little vengeance on them stealing their gold. But a 21-year siege, can you imagine growing up under siege for 21 years?
No, I mean, I feel like humans are adaptable, and if you're born in it, you just eventually go, "Oh, this is just..."
accept that as like that's the way things just are.
Yeah, I mean,
That's
there's
just
a guy,
life.
the crazy story of the guy from North Korea who escaped he was born in the North Korean concentration camp, grew up in thought that was the whole world, escaped. He was literally the child between, they just said to these two prisoners, "Hey, you two have been good slaves, essentially. You're married now." And so that's how he was born. And that's how he just grew up, is in a North Korean concentration. It's a crazy story. And so, yeah, he escaped and went like, holy shit, there's a lot more to the world.
Yeah, I believe it.
Living in a country that doesn't have electricity for the most part. Yeah.
I mean, but he didn't even for North Korea, like obviously cars, any
it's a dark part of the globe. There's literally like a giant black patch where North Korea is.
Yeah.
Like at night.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like,
and so
a lot of them are too poor to even afford candles. It's crazy shit like that.
Yeah. Well, that's yeah. And so, yeah, I feel like it's pretty normal. If that's your normal, then it's your normal. You just go like, whatever. For us, we'd go, what the fuck? But yeah, people born into it. It's just an everyday thing. I'm sure that they weren't attacking every day, right? They just, there's the Ottomans outside.
Yeah, no, probably not every single day. But towards the end, it did kind of stay like there was a constant stream of attacking. When the French arrived, they'd already broken down the outer walls. And you think after 21 years, you'd hope they get through at least the outer wall.
We did it, guys! Yeah, we got the outer wall.
Mission
I don't know. It
accomplished.
just seems like, I guess there's a theme here. The Ottomans don't seem to be the best at sieges.
Yeah, I'm kind of perplexed how they conquered so much land at this point so quickly too, and held it for centuries, upon like 600 years.
Yeah, I do have to admit, like I say that, but then it's like they did spend 21 years attacking the city. They didn't give up. I'll give them that.
Yeah, I'll give that credit. It wasn't like it's like literally the opposite of what happened with the French. One of our boats caught on fire and blew up. We got to go home. The Ottomans, they stole our gold. We're going to stay here for 21 years.
Yeah. 21 years is long enough for like technology to change and like, culture to change in other parts of the world. So it's
it's a commitment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Let me tell you, did you also pick the Ottomans, Jared?
No, I didn't pick the Ottomans. I picked something a little bit more recent.
Okay.
The year is 1942.
Oh.
Okay.
I know what you picked.
Yeah, everyone does. Everyone does. So Hitler, after being emboldened by pretty much taking Europe without pretty much any casualties, just steamrolling over everybody, decided to enact Operation Barbarossa, taking revenge on the Soviets, which he hated from World War I, or they were just Russians back then, but he hated them. Anyway,
all that goodwill and peace, dividing Poland up,
non-aggression pact, but who cares? Began his invasion of Russia, pushed all the way up to Moscow. Like they claimed that the German troops could see the Kremlin, like the towers of this Kremlin. But then the Russian winter started to hit, and Russia started to push back. And Hitler ordered them to stop what they were doing instead of taking Moscow. And like, you know what? Stalingrad, which sounds bad. But there were a couple good reasons for it. They should have taken Moscow first, to be fair. But there were a couple good reasons for it. The first was Stalingrad was a major, major industrial city. Like so much going on there as far as like war production. So obviously an important aspect of that. The second thing was Hitler didn't have like a lot of oil. Like there's not a lot of oil in Europe. That's why part of why they invaded North Africa, but not a lot of oil in Europe. So Stalingrad is very close to a couple cities that have a large, large oil reserve. So the Nazis saw it as, okay, well, what we'll do is we'll pull back from Moscow, take Stalingrad, wait out the winter, and then steamroll the rest of Russia, essentially, because like we've taken away their oil production, their major manufacturing hub, and we've kind of put the scare on their major cities. So that's kind of their idea. So
we all know the real reason is Hitler wanted to conquer the city that was
named after the leader of Russia. Yeah. It was meant to be an embarrassment.
I was going to say his generals didn't seem to agree with his good reason.
No, they disagreed. They disagreed vehemently. He wanted to like. He wanted to like. Again, like I said, like his generals were like, we pretty much have Moscow. Like we're like right fucking here, but he's like, no.
Who cares about Moscow? It's only the capital.
And to this point, they have been like rolling through the Russians. Like there's been like little resistance. They have just been like destroying the Russians because they've been very under-equipped. In fact, this is where that whole story comes from of like they send two Russians into combat. One has a rifle, the other one doesn't. You wait for the guy with a gun to die, and you take it after he's done and continue going. That's where this story comes from, is the first part of the war. Because they were very under-equipped. Like crazy under-equipped. So the Germans having, I don't know, armies with food, basic supplies, tanks, Air Force, kind of helped a little bit. So,
yeah, but the Russians had one crucial resource that the Germans did not, and that was men and the willingness to just send them to die.
Yeah, just literally sacrificing to slaughter.
That comes in later. Spoiler alert. That comes in later. Yeah. Well, what also helped the Russians is their very harsh winter, which helped push back the Germans a bit.
That's true, yeah.
But that started to push back the Germans a little bit, and they said they had their sights on Stalingrad, obviously because Hitler really pushed for it. But they started their invasion, and they started their invasion with a large aerial bombardment from the Luftwaffe, and like enormous. The Germans, just to give you like an idea of like how much they outmanned the Russians, like they outmanned them by 80,000 troops. And that's just ground troops. That's not including Air Force and tanks, where they heavily outnumbered them in Air Force and tanks as well. Like, and they had the better generals. Like at this point, Stalin got a little bit liberal with who he was killing because he thought that they were going to usurp his power. So, not a lot of good leaders in Russia.
Yeah. Turns out when you kill all of them, it's like when they kill all the doctors and then you get sick. He's just like, Well, you killed all the doctors. Who's going to treat you?
Like, oh, congratulations, Staff Sergeant, to the gulag.
To the
To the gulag.
Yeah, so not the best military minds, but it didn't seem to matter, at least in the long run. So the Germans started with a large aerial bombardment. And so Stalin obviously saw the writing on the wall, ordered a few things to happen. First thing he ordered was all the supplies and gear like out of the fucking city. Like get all the stuff we need out of the city. The second one was you are to keep the civilians there because it's going to make the troops in there fight harder if they have civilians they're protecting. Right? So
yes. Also, Stalin doesn't want to feed them, but
also true. There's a few reasons, as will become apparent later on. So, the battle for Stalingrad begins. There are like books written about specific battles within this siege because of like all the crazy shit that happened. Like, there was a rail station that was taken and lost 14 times in 6 hours by the Germans and the Russians, like back and forth.
Oh crap!
There was one like house in the middle of the city held by the Russians for like I think it was like a month, and it was only like 30 troops held off the Germans in this one like little fucking house. They called it like the castle. And the Germans like had names for all this shit. So
I believe that. Yeah.
Russians who like a small group held down this. Like there are books written about like these individual battles. Like, so much happened here. Like there was a group of all women, like an all women unit that like drove tanks and like defended the city with tanks. Defended the city with anti-aircraft guns. Like they first had them facing up obviously to stop the bombardment from the air, but they faced them down and destroyed something like 100 German tanks as they were coming into the city. These anti-aircraft guns.
Damn.
Yeah, like the Russians like made this a very costly offensive for the Germans, and for a while. Most of it, the Germans had the Russians beat bad. They were on their last leg. Like it was looking like this was gonna be over. Like this was like the Soviet Union's gonna roll over. This is gonna be it. Like World War II has a different outcome. Like you don't have this type of force coming from the east attacking Europe. Maybe Hitler lasts like a lot longer because this is it for the Russians. Like they have like an all out fight here. It got so bad like. Stalin order. I had a famous order. I don't remember what the order was called. It's like a specific number order. But what they did was, it was an order where where Stalin had troops at the back of the line for the Russian offensive, and if you retreated, you were shot. So like, yeah, and if you weren't shot, you were put in what's considered like a prison unit, which they had like prisoners. Put in these specific units sent to the most dangerous parts of the front. Yeah. So if you're not killed by the gunshot as you're running to try to escape the battle, you're going to die fighting in the more dangerous part. So it's a little bit of a motivator to try to get the Russian troops going. But
yeah, that would work.
Anyway.
But I don't have a rifle. I don't care.
I don't care. Find one. But the craziest thing that happened, though, was the Russian counteroffensive. And this is like, it was literally an all-out gamble. It was, we're going to succeed or we're all going to die and we're going to lose to the Germans. This is essentially what it was. It was a double pincer move around the Germans. And it only succeeded because it was an overcast day and they couldn't have any, and the Germans didn't have air support. It was a super overcast rain day, so the Germans couldn't sweep in with their planes, and the Russians were able to do a double pincer and encircle the German troops. Thus, the actual siege began, which the German Sixth Army was in the middle of Stalingrad for like it was like something like 8 months. It was a long time, and instead of like surrendering or pushing troops in order to take back Stalingrad or take back or at least like liberate the troops that are there, they needed the troops to help their retreat because they were losing other fronts along Russia. Because when the winter was happening, this is when Russia's like the troops like really started to like fall into their own. So they were able to start pushing the Germans back. So they needed these other troops that could have gone to Stalingrad and rescued them to help kind of like cover their retreat. And not only that, the leader of the Luftwaffe told Adolf Hitler, hey, we're going to be able to supply these troops with airdrops, no problem. we have air superiority. It's no big deal. Which obviously was not the case because something like they needed 700 tons of food a day to supply these troops. And they were only able to drop in 100 tons.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Germans are in
You also
circle.
are flying in the winter in Russia. You know, your oil's freezing. It's like,
Yeah.
Well, they thought it was going to be over like quickly, right? That's one of the reasons they were like, "Oh, it's fine. We have enough food for a certain amount of time." And
they didn't bring winter clothing.
they didn't bring in. They thought they would be over, and it wasn't over.
To be fair, it almost was. They were taking Moscow.
It should have been over. They should have taken.
It should have been over. But then they went to Stalingrad.
Yeah.
And instead, the Germans, and to be fair, a lot of the Germans' troops at this point were mostly like Italians and like other countries. Like this is like a lot of like foreign troops helping like the Germans fight. They fought in 3 large groups for months and months, and because they didn't really have enough support from Germany, and essentially they're just kind of left there. So they either fought to the death or surrendered. So like these 3 large groups of Germans, that was kind of it. They're cut off from supplies, everything, and like. A lot of books and movies are about the fight in Europe from the American side, or the fight in the Pacific or the Western Front of Europe. But look more into the actual Eastern Front, the conflict on that. It's all out warfare at a brutal level that is the world has never seen since. It is like you combine modern tactics with just the brutal, lawless warfare. Like the Germans and the Russians did things they didn't do on the Western Front just because of like. Germany didn't want the retaliation from the United States, and Russia didn't give a shit. Like it was crazy stuff happened on the Eastern Front, and it's so often looked over just because a lot of film and a lot of books actually do follow the Western Front and the Pacific far more, just because it has more like relevance in a lot of Americans' lives.
That is a big factor in why invading Russia is so hard. I mean, the winter, and also they just don't give a shit. They're gonna beat you with whatever they have. They'll beat you with a rock. They don't care. It's
the brutal warfare. Like they used weapons and tactics, and there were atrocities that they just didn't do to the West on the Western side of the war, just because they didn't want the United States and Britain to retaliate. But they didn't give a shit fighting Russia because like Russia's gonna do the same thing, and Russia did do the same thing.
And in between them, that suffered the most, Poland.
Yeah, Poland is a very interesting like country in history. It's there, then it's not. It's there, then it's not. It's there, then it's not.
All right, that was our podcast on famous sieges. A lot of blood, a lot of gore, a lot of death, a lot of heroicism from a lot of different people. So hopefully you learned something. As always, look for us on YouTube or Spotify on A Good Story. Till next time.